Hey, night owls, insomniacs, and historically curious lurkers. Before you tuck that blanket under your chin, do me a tiny favor. Tap the subscribe button like you're tightening a noose, flick the bell like an anxious jailer's keys, and let me know in the comments what time it is in your corner of the darkness and which snack is currently fueling your sleepless binge. Your likes and words are the torchlight that keeps this channel's gallows aglow. And trust me, we've got a long, shadow-soaked road ahead tonight. All set? Good. Dim your lamp, silence the roommate, and join me in the rattling cart that's rolling over the cobbles toward an execution ground somewhere in late medieval Europe. You can smell yesterday's rain in the hay, hear the creak of the wheels, and feel the anxious breath of the condemned man sitting to your left, though he's not the star of the show. No, tonight we're riding with the executioner himself, hood folded in his lap, palms sweating more than the poor soul beside him. You'd think the man with the big blade would be calm, but his heartbeat thunders louder than the church bells, and it's not the axe he fears, it's you, or rather, the thousands of loud, half-drunk versions of you who will be waiting at the scaffold, ready to judge his every swing. Executioners were contratistas of death, yes, but they were also performers forced to face the harshest critics on earth. Mobs itching for drama, revenge, or a miracle. One slip, one bad chop, and the same crowd that cheered seconds ago could hurl stones, rotten vegetables, or worse, rumors. In an age when reputation clung tighter than linen and stench, a botched beheading meant a lifetime stain. That's the fellow who needed 5 whacks. It could ruin contracts, drive him from town, or invite vengeance from relatives who swore the condemned felt pain too long. No pressure, right? Let's rewind. You're born into a tanner's family in a riverside slum. Pig hides, foul water, low taxes. One morning the bailiff drops by. The old headsman died of plague, and someone has to wield the sword next Friday. Refuse, and your family's debts get very official. Accept, and you earn steady coin, a small house near the walls, and a guaranteed place at weekly markets, all in exchange for turning flesh to silence. Plenty of medieval executioners were conscripted exactly like that. They were outcasts already handling dead animals. So what's a few more corpses? The catch? Everybody looked away when you passed. But crowds looked right at you the moment you stepped on that scaffold, each face an unblinking jury. Picture dawn on hanging day. The sky is pewter, birds still uncertain whether to sing. You wake in your cottage on the edge of town, shove crusty bread in your mouth, and rehearse the ritual. Test the edge, whisper a prayer, rub resin on your grip. Your spouse pretends to sleep, pretending hard not to count how many times the blades failed before, because superstitions cling thicker than chimney soot. Some towns swore a clean strike meant good harvest. Others believed 3 strokes let evil spirits loose. Either way, you're the hinge between omen and uproar. Now saddle up. Your assistant, often your own teen son, loads the sword into a canvas wrap while you tuck a short knife in your boot, just in case the condemned panics. As you cross the bridge into town, word spreads like spilt ale. Headsman's coming. Shopkeepers lean out, children run behind, muttering the chant, "One stroke, one stroke." They're not cheering for you, they're daring you. Fail, and they'll talk about your trembling wrists for decades. The scaffold is already built. Fresh pine, sticky with sap, because reusing old planks risks rot, and a wobbly platform is the last thing anyone needs when 100 pounds of thrashing life meets gravity. Local carpenters know this. They also know if the scaffold collapses mid-spectacle, the angry mob will blame the headsman first, carpenters second. So everything's tight as a drum, except your throat. Let's freeze that scene. Beneath the stage planks, there's a bucket of sawdust to soak runaway blood. Next to it, a low-lit brazier holding pitch and tar, the medieval disinfectant kit. For you, disease is a bigger fear than your victims. A nicked knuckle that mingles with plague-tainted blood? Good night, sweet executioner. Gloves help, but not much. They're sheep's leather, stiff in winter, slick in summer. Meanwhile, the crowd gathers like storm clouds. Merchants in bright hose, fishwives with baskets, pickpockets fingering purses, and clergy there to redeem the scene with murmured Latin. They're elbowing for the best view, because morality lesson or not, they want spectacle. In an era before Netflix, this is prime content, live, gruesome, and hopefully quick. The faster you finish, the faster the townsfolk can spin legends at the tavern. Oh, the way his head rolled! But here's the twist. The people don't want too quick. They thirst for a moment's delay, an intake of breath, that tremor of justice dangling. If you swing before the mayor's speech ends, They'll boo for cheating them out of drama. Too late, and the crowd may decide you're taunting them. You're reading their mood like a barometer, calibrating your muscles to public appetite, and praying your target doesn't faint off the block. Nothing spoils choreography like a limp neck that won't stay put. Speaking of necks, not all condemned cooperate. Some shuffle forward stoically. Others curse, bite, spit, or attempt that last pathetic sprint toward nowhere. You must wrestle them onto the block, tie hair out of the way, whisper a final instruction. Head steady, shoulders still. Yes, some executioners muttered kindness. It reduced accidents. The crowd hushes. Your lungs empty. Blade up. Sunlight flickers on steel, and in that split-second mirror you glimpse hundreds of faces, all wanting the story to end clean. Slice. Ideally, it's a single, practiced arc drawn by the weight of iron and your own accelerating fear. The instant you feel bone, you push through, because hesitation means snagging sinew, which means second swing, which means horror. And if that happens, the mob roars, not in pity for the dying, but in fury at you. People believe the soul can't depart until the head's free. Every added chop is a theft of grace. Imagine the worst-case fiasco. Swing one, glances off vertebrae, blood erupts like red fountain paint across your apron. The condemned howls. Yes, they can still vocalize partially. The priest shouts prayers louder, children scream. Shock pulses through the crowd like heat. You raise the blade again, sweaty, desperate not to vomit. Second blow lands jagged. A fishwife faints. By the third, rage boils. Stones sail toward the scaffold. Someone shrieks, "Monster!" You finish the gruesome job, but now the mayor's guards must shield you in retreat, because justice turned to butchery under your shaky hands. Tomorrow, pamphlets of mockery circulate. Next week, a rival town refuses your services, and you're branded the butcher of three strokes. No wonder executioners feared crowds. Swords are predictable, physics obeys. People? Never. Rumor can hang you higher than any rope. Some headsmen traveled under aliases, staying nowhere long. Others cultivated stagecraft, fancy uniforms, deliberate rituals, so the public saw method rather than menace. They might flourish the blade, bow, display the severed head, anything to keep control of the atmosphere, like a maestro spanking timpani, and yet seats nearest the scaffold cost a premium. In London's Tyburn or Paris's Place de Grève, good vantage points belong to gutsy entrepreneurs renting out window space. Crowds could hit tens of thousands on Royal Trader Days. Vendors sold pies shaped like little axes, or spiced wine to keep you warm while waiting. Executions were carnival, courtroom, and church service mashed together, and the man with the blade balanced compassion, terror, and public relations all in one impossibly sweaty tunic. Let's roll back to our headsman batting 1,000. One stroke, every time so far. He's paid per job, sometimes coins up front, sometimes property rights to the condemned's clothes. Yes, after the deed he rummages through the dead man's jacket because that's part of his wage. But coin can vanish quick. Supply costs, bribes, the price of keeping apprentices loyal. If he messes up, he may lose not just tomorrow's pay, but his entire livelihood. Some towns even find executioners for botches, docking wages like medieval HR. At home, he's an outsider. Bakers won't break bread with him, barbers refuse to shave him, taverns keep his mug separate. Children point. But those same townsfolk demand perfection when he climbs the scaffold. Hypocrisy, meet guillotine. Oh, that's later. 18th century France perfects the humane national razor. Until then, it's sword and axe all the way. Between gigs, our headsman moonlights as a surgeon of sorts. Who else knows anatomy as intimately? Need a malignant boil lanced or a thief's ear sliced for punishment? He's your man. Some even brew love potions or dispose of animal carcasses. Anything to earn coin without leaving town. But again, crowd opinion looms. If folks hear you saved a nobleman's mistress with your herb salve, they might grudgingly respect you. If they hear you desecrated a corpse for cadaver lessons, torches and pitchforks appear at midnight. Executioners also police duels, counting paces, ensuring fairness, then sometimes finishing the loser. They impounded contraband knives, inspected scaffold ropes, and occasionally tortured suspects for confessions. In short, they sat at a grotesque crossroads of fear and necessity. People despised them but couldn't function without them, like plumbers of justice. The latrine's dirty, but someone must unclog societal guilt. Now about fear. A headsman dreaded the crowd most fiercely on days involving multiple condemned. The strain of consecutive beheadings, stiffened muscles, and dulled blades. Imagine you've just ended number 5, sweat blurring vision, blood greasing the hilt. There are 3 more to go, and spectators can sense fatigue. A chant starts. Sharp blade. Sharp blade. Suddenly every strike feels heavier. Your apprentice scrambles to hone the edge while the priest prolongs hymns to stall. But crowds get restless quickly. Booing spirals into thrown eggs. Guards tighten lines. And there you stand center stage, praying your right arm won't spasm and ruin life number 6. By nightfall, if all goes well, you lug the blade home, toss apron into lye water, and sink onto a bench as your spouse ladles thin stew. The house is silent, except for your pulse still pounding in ears. In the morning, rumor tide will decide. Were you swift, dignified, heartless? Too heartless and the clergy may scold, not heartless enough and townsfolk say you're weak. And that is why an executioner feared the crowd more than steel, because the crowd wrote the long-term sentence. We haven't even touched the special nightmare called public quartering, or the political minefield of executing a beloved folk hero, nor the grisly science of blade weights, the secret guild signals carved on handles, or the midnight burial rituals that kept angry ghosts at bay. But those can wait for tomorrow night's ride. For now, shuffle back under your blankets and imagine the scratch of straw beneath the headsman's hood as he hangs it on a peg, hoping tomorrow nobody whispers his name alongside the word bungler. Try drifting off to the creak of scaffold timber cooling in moonlight, because in part 2 we'll crawl beneath that platform, sift through crimson sawdust, and unravel how crowds turned into judges, juries, and sometimes executioners themselves. All right, lanterns low, shoulders hunched, duck with me under the platform where our executioner stood mere hours ago. The crowd has stumbled home, drunk on spectacle and cheap ale. The condemned is silent as a church crypt, and moonlight slips through floorboards in thin silver stripes. First sensation? The smell. Not the sharp coppery sting you expect from fresh blood. That's mostly up on the planks already crusting at dawn. Down here the air is thick with tar, sawdust, and something sour that reminds you of spilt cider left too long in the sun. Executioners knew decay starts fast, and they scattered sawdust like priests fling holy water, hoping to keep disease from crawling into their lungs. By dawn, those curls of shredded pine are scarlet edges of misery, sticky enough to tug at your boots. Kneel a moment. You'll find things the crowd never sees. A snapped rosary bead, the condemned clutched until the last nerve fired. A bent pin from the executioner's cuff that popped loose mid-swing. A tiny scrap of parchment with a saint's name, tossed by a superstitious onlooker who hoped to snag some forgiveness on the cheap. These relics spill through the cracks when bodies thrash, and each item tells an afterstory. The bead means our victim was praying so hard the string snapped. The pin whispers our headsman was shaking more than he let on. And the parchment, well, that's centuries of folk theology. Stand close enough to death and maybe a saint notices you. Shift your lantern and you'll spot heavy drips of pitch congealed on a shovel's iron point. Pitch served as medieval bleach. The assistant would ladle it over the block between victims, the acrid fumes clearing flies, and people prayed, contagion. Remember, no one knew about bacteria, but they did understand stench equals sickness. So they fought odor with a worse odor, creating a choking, blistering haze that rose through the scaffold planks and forced the crowd to lean back. A primitive, 6 feet of distance rule. Listen, a rat scuttles, squeaking when it skids on blood-slick dust. Rodents were constant at execution grounds. Some cities hired cats to patrol after dark, but cats rarely competed with the feasts left hanging. Picked bones drew carrion crows at sunrise, and the cawing sounded like mockery. If our executioner botched a job, rumor claimed crows cawed louder next morning, as if the birds themselves critiqued technique. Now step back and picture the scene above, hours earlier. The crowd, shoulder to shoulder, formed a living wall of judgment. In medieval Europe, public punishment was as much civic theater as justice. Municipal councils published timetables: 10 o'clock, sermon; 11, confession; noon, beheading, and locals arrived like theatergoers, jostling for prime real estate. Tavern owners pushed kegs on handcarts, hawkers sold spiced nuts, and pickpockets mapped escape routes. The scaffold became a stage, the headsman its nervous leading actor, and every flutter in his cloak told the audience how to feel. If he strutted, they cheered. If he fumbled, tension snapped into violence. Execution manuals, which really existed, taught timing down to breaths. Let the prisoner see the blade only at the last, one German guide advised, else his trembling may spoil the blow. Another insisted the headsman must stomp twice before raising the sword, a signal for the crowd to hush. Think of it as an early version of stage direction. a crisp flourish to command attention, like a conductor tapping the podium. But the crowd, oh, how quickly they soured. Medieval chroniclers record riots sparked by heads mislanding in the wrong direction, spatters hitting noble spectators, or executions delayed so long the sun set and torches threw ghastly shadows, transforming fear into hysteria. Our headsman studied those chronicles the way a modern surgeon studies malpractice suits. A single miscue, and he'd flee under cover of darkness, family in tow, looking for a town desperate or foolish enough to employ him. Pause the lantern glow and imagine the social cost. In daily life, the headsman was untouchable, literally. Butchers refused his coins. Smiths made him his own set of tools so no honest iron touched his grim steel. Parish priests might deny him communion, worried his stained hands would taint the sacrament. His children learned early to walk around village wells rather than drink from them, lest mothers yank infants away. Yet on payday, the city coffers opened. Hypocrisy wears a livery coat. Let's climb the scaffold stairs. Careful, one step squeaks, still damp from scrubbing. Up top, the block is pitted like a lunar surface from countless strikes. Headsmen oiled the block nightly, hoping to prevent splinters lodging in freshly carved necks, but each axe bite left a wound. Constant planing would shrink the block, so many cities replaced it yearly and sold the old one for firewood. Imagine heating your hovel with timber that still bears notches of sin. Some folks refused to burn those planks, claiming the smoke could summon restless spirits. Others paid extra, believing ashes of criminals drove away pests. Stand where the condemned knelt. Feel the groove that guided his chin, slick with tallow, the assistant smeared to reduce friction and maybe pain. The groove's depth measures the headsman's precision. Too shallow and heads slide, too deep and his sword catches. Every nick is a lesson in anatomy. You can almost hear his whispered counts. 1 vertebra, 2, muscle layers thin as parchment, sinew like harp strings that snap when struck. Look outward. Beyond the square lies a fringe of stalls where charlatan healers sold vials of black gall scraped from criminals' livers. Folks believed ingesting a fragment might cure epilepsy, impart bravery, or break love spells. Execution created not just corpses, but a grisly supply chain. Bones ground for medicine, hair woven into amulets, fat rendered for candles said to reveal witches. Horrifying? Absolutely. But medieval economies wasted nothing, least of all a freshly expired body. Now spin back to the crowd's psychology. Why watch? Scholars suggest 3 cravings: moral reassurance, evil punished, communal bonding, shared shock, and eschaton rehearsal, practicing for final judgment. Some attendees wept in pity, others chanted hymns, others jeered, each reaction a mirror of private guilt. For a few it was plain titillation, the same thrill modern audiences chase in horror films. The headsman, unwitting ringmaster, had to feed all these appetites without becoming a villain. He performed stoic righteousness, chin high, movements economical, eyes solemn. Too much flair and he was cruel, too little and he invited scorn. Did he believe in his spiritual role? Many did. Guilds of executioners kept patron saints. St. Julian the Hospitaller was popular, believed to absolve accidental killers. Some wore relic medallions inside their tunics, touching them between swings. They saw themselves as final gatekeepers, ensuring a penitent soul crossed over swiftly. Yet at midnight, doubt gnawed. Surviving diaries reveal nightmares, headless specters tapping at shutters, phantom screams echoing in dreams. One Nuremberg executioner confessed he slept with a candle burning, convinced darkness would unleash the voices of men he'd silenced. Pull the hood over your own head now. Vision tunnels. Cloth smells of smoke and stale sweat. Breathing deepens, heartbeat fills your ears. Crowd noise warps into an oceanic roar. Some headsmen cut tiny holes in the hood to avoid suffocation, but superstition warned against too wide a slit. Evil eye could slip through and blind you with guilt. Imagine peering at hundreds of faces, each expecting perfect violence, while your own face remains unseen. Anonymity is armor, yet it isolates. No wonder many headsmen grew fond of drink, dissolving memory in ale until dawn. Speaking of dawn, our current scaffold scene is quiet but not quite safe. City watchmen patrol, wary of thieves who might snatch nails from the platform to sell as talismans. Some believed iron that tasted blood had power to cure fevers. Boil a nail in beer and drink the bitter draught. In desperate times, mothers risked arrest to clip hemstitch off the executioner's apron, sewing it into children's collars as plague ward. The gallows district was paradox, repellent and magnetic, cursed yet sacred. Shift your gaze to the executioner's toolkit, lying inside an oiled leather roll by the steps. Besides the great sword, There's a hand axe for lesser limbs, a slender misericord dagger for mercy strokes, a whetstone grooved from endless honing, and vials of goose grease to ease blade glide. Each tool demands maintenance. Rust is mortal sin. Between jobs, our headsman visits the blacksmith at dusk when the forge is empty, trading secrets. Temper the edge hotter to hold bite, and slipping coins estranged from honest pouches. Smiths oblige, it pays well, but they lay the anvil with salt afterward, purging invisible stain. Let's hover at the moment just before the swing. Crowd hushes. Even horses tethered beyond the square stop clopping. The condemned's breath frosts. A bell tolls, maybe the town clock striking noon, or a friar's handbell announcing his final absolution. In that suspended second, the headsman's world shrinks to wrist tension and angle of steel. Historians recreated the physics. A two-handed sword weighing 9 pounds, arc velocity near 20 miles per hour, generating enough momentum to cleave spinal column if edge alignment stays true. But shift a few degrees and bone can deflect blade, forcing brutal repetition. Physics and psychology fuse, precision born of terror, slice. The moment passes. Blood fans in a hot arc, spattering the priest's cope, speckling maids' kerchiefs, dotting a guildmaster's boots. Some recoil, others lean closer. A few dab cloths in blood to dry as miracle relics. Yes, that happened. Then roar, collective exhale, moral order briefly satisfied. Town criers later proclaim justice served, balladeers write verses, children recite the head's final blink. And in taverns arguments spark. Was the headsman merciful or savage? Each retelling distorts the arc length, number of spurts, color of lips. Story becomes currency, and the executioner's reputation slides up or down like weights on a scale. At home that night, our headsman scrubs the blade with vinegar and ash, polishes till moonlight dances on the edge, then slips it into a chest lined with lavender to mask iron smell. Children tiptoe, they're curious but wary. Wife lights a taper, sets broth on the hearth, speaks softly about mundane things, grain prices, a neighbor's calf. They avoid the subject of screams. Yet routine cannot eclipse memory. Sometimes he dreams he's the condemned, staring at his own hooded shape. Other nights he's in the crowd and someone else swings, and he feels the weird thrill of watching himself vanish. Years pass, muscles ache, joints stiffen from winter platforms. New townsfolk petition the council to replace him. He's too old, too shaky. But the city treasury balks. Training fresh blood is costly and novices botch. So he lobbies for a pension, pointing to perfect one-stroke record. Council grants a pittance on condition he trains a successor, often his eldest son, beginning the grim dynasty anew. Apprenticeship entails anatomy lessons on plague pits, practicing on sheep carcasses, learning to read crowd mood like weather signs. A father's legacy, steady hand, steady nerves, steady isolation. Step back from that personal tragedy and zoom out. Public executions gradually shift indoors in the 17th century across parts of Europe, shrinking crowds, damping hysteria. But for our medieval timeline, open spectacle reigns, and the executioner will die half respected, half feared, wholly necessary. His burial may occur outside consecrated ground. Churchyards rarely welcome the headsman's bones. Some cities granted him a corner plot behind the charnel house, where soil already brimmed with unclaimed remains. Even in death, separation persisted. Now gently set down your lantern. Sawdust swirls. A cock crows somewhere beyond the ramparts, heralding sunrise. Soon workers will arrive to scrape strips of flesh from the block, replace straw, and erect new symbolism. Perhaps a traitor's head spiked on a pike, grinning until birds hollow the sockets. The scaffold never sleeps. It resets like a grim sundial, marking hours with blood instead of shadow. Pull your cloak tight and follow me away from the square. As we leave, ponder this. Was the executioner villain, victim, or both? Does the mob absolve his violence or inflame it? And could you keep your hand steady while thousands watch your every tremor? Slide these thoughts under your pillow. If sleep still dodges you, drop a comment. Which relic from beneath the scaffold would you pocket? Rosary bead, bent pin, or blood-soaked sawdust? Smash that like if your heart rate stayed below galloping horse level, and sling the subscribe like a bucket of tar on germs of insomnia. All right, lanterns raised, voices hushed. We leave the scaffold behind and shuffle across cobbles slick from an early morning drizzle. The sky is charcoal, the air sharp with hearth smoke, and every footfall echoes between timbered houses like a whispered rumor. Our destination? The executioner's workshop, a ramshackle annex stitched to the city wall where iron sings, whetstones rasp, and secrets hang thicker than tallow smoke. Push open the warped door. First sensation, warmth, damp and heavy. curling off a forge that never truly sleeps. A bellows, big as a church organ, sighs as the headsman's apprentice pumps it with weary arms. Sparks leap, vanishing in the gloom above. The forge isn't only for swords, it tempers branding irons, hooks to hoist bodies onto wheels, and curious little chisels shaped like crescent moons, the kind used to snip ears or brand thieves' cheeks. Tools of shame coexist with tools of death, all gleaming like fallen stars. To your left, iron cages squat in a row, sized to clamp around wrists or ankles. Each bears engraved runes, owner's marks, prayers for sharpness, or crude sketches of saints meant to sanctify steel. One cuff carries a tiny enamel rose, chipped and blackened. Legend says an executioner once fell in love with a condemned woman. Unable to save her, he carved a rose on the shackle that linked them for her final walk. Romantic, perhaps. Haunted, certainly. Apprentices swear the rose never cools, even in winter. On a table lie leather-bound ledgers, inventories of every blade, rope, and iron weight. The city council audits these books quarterly, terrified the headsman might sell confiscated goods on the sly, or worse, misplace a torture device. Corruption is rampant. Punishment tools fetch high prices on the black market as collectors' trophies. But losing, say, the spiked heretic's fork would mean city magistrates banging on the door, torches in hand, because missing pain equals missing control. Beside the ledger rests a smaller journal, personal, edges chewed by nervous thumbs. Peek and you'll see sketches. Cross-sections of human necks, angle calculations, bone densities annotated in cramped Latin. The headsman is illiterate in poetry but fluent in vertebrae. One margin note reads, "Ver 5 thicker in winter. Caution." He's discovered that swollen muscles from layering clothes can deflect a blade. History forgets, but executioners were reluctant anatomists, mapping flesh long before university surgeons dared open a cadaver. While you absorb that, the apprentice drags a wooden tub to the hearth. Inside sloshes rank brine, sheep fat, salt, and ash, perfect for quenching. He plunges a glowing spit iron, steam exploding in a hiss that fogs your spectacles if you wear any. Stench of scorched tallow floods the room. Why brine? Ordinary water could warp metal. The fat mixture cools evenly, locking a gleaming edge that stays true through bone and gristle. Craft refined through generations. Each master passes the recipe to his heir, alongside moral cautions. Temper steel hotter if the crowd is large, colder for thin necks. Shelves above the forge display oddities. A jar of powdered mother of pearl, sprinkled on fresh cuts to slow bleeding if the headsman is moonlighting as a healer. Dried wolfbane blossoms. Superstition says sprinkling them beneath the scaffold keeps werewolves from gnawing corpses. And a murky bottle labeled nervinum. Open it, you'd find poppy tar infused with wine. An early anesthetic the headsman drinks on sleepless nights when phantom screams scratch the inside of his skull. We step toward the far wall, where a curtain of chainmail drips from ceiling hooks. Not armor, more like butcher's aprons, woven rings trapping blood splatter so outer clothes stay presentable. Beneath them hang wicker baskets lined with straw. Inside, confiscated items from today's victim, shoes with buckles, the brass will be melted for nails, belt with silver tip, a purse containing 2 pfennigs and a child's carved whistle. The city will auction the valuables. The whistle often ends up in the headsman's pocket. A silent souvenir, maybe a reminder that every neck belonged once to a singing child. Notice a narrow stairwell winding downward. Lantern in hand descend. Walls sweat moisture. Air cools. Your breath ghosts. This is the holding cellar, where prisoners spend their final night. Cells are just alcoves behind iron bars, straw on damp stone, a bucket for waste. But each cubicle tells a story. Carved into one beam, tally marks, 5 crossed through, then 5 again, someone counting days or lashes. Another beam bears a crude bird, wings spread toward a crack of daylight never seen from here. Hope, scratched into darkness. At the corridor's end, a heavy oak door stands ajar. Step through and find the confessor's chapel, a sad little chamber where priests try to coax last-minute penitents. Candle stubs, a chipped crucifix, and strings of dried herbs hang like pale ghosts. Executioners aren't allowed to witness confessions, but they press ears against the plank, gauging whether the condemned plans drama, a final speech, a curse, a spit in the mayor's face. Those details affect crowd temperature tomorrow. Back upstairs, dawn slants through a soot-stained window. Time to sharpen. The headsman crouches on a 3-legged stool, sets the great sword across his knees, and begins the slow, hypnotic pull of edge against whetstone. Shwip, 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 each stroke a heartbeat. He oils the blade with goose grease, inspects for nicks. If one chip remains, it could snag on hair or tendon, causing that dreaded second blow. The apprentice stands ready with sand-filled leather to strop the edge, polishing till reflection looks like black water. Let's zoom into the blade's surface. Under lantern light, you see tiny scratches mapping years of service. Some headsmen etched initials of every victim, macabre roll call of guilt on gleaming steel. Others left a single phrase, memento mori, remember death, as if the blade needs reminding. Now imagine we freeze time at this precise moment. Blade poised, executioner's breath visible, tension thick. If we step outside his workshop, the city stirs. Market stalls snap open like clamshells. Bakers pound loaves, fishmongers gut dawn's catch. Gossip travels faster than carts. Today a highwayman stole from monks. Parents debate bringing children, education or nightmare. In taverns bets are laid, will our headsman manage one clean stroke? Odds shift with weather. A damp sword might slip. A humid breeze could thicken stench, rattling his focus. Who knew meteorology and murder blended so intimately? Return to the workshop. The headsman slides the sword into a waxed leather case, ties 3 cords, and murmurs a prayer, sometimes to Saint Dismas, the good thief crucified next to Christ, patron of prisoners and apparently those ending them. Hypocrisy again, he prays for a steady hand and a merciful death for his victim. Duality sits heavy on that bench. He dons work clothes, linen shirt, thick hose, knee boots, and overall, the black coat bearing the city crest. Contrary to legend, many executioners did not wear full-face hoods every time. Some cities required an open face so citizens saw justice served by a human, not a demon. Others insisted on the hood to symbolize impartiality, mask fear, or protect families from retribution. Our man compromises. Hood up for foreign criminals, hood down for locals whose relatives might read his eyes and decide revenge. Speaking of vengeance, let's stroll through case files stacked beside the forge. Parchment edges curl like autumn leaves. One record details a carpenter who smashed a noble's wine cask. Offense, property damage, penalty, ear cropping. That's tomorrow's docket. The headsman's smaller blade will slice cartilage while a bailiff holds the man's shoulders. Another file, a heretic preacher due for burning in 2 weeks. Burning demands skill, bizarrely. Too much wet wood and the fire chokes, prolonging agony. Too much dry and the body cooks fierce, spitting fat, causing panicked crowds scatter. Executioners maintain special wood piles. Oak for slow heat, birch for bright flame, green willow to smoke out devils. A grim art of pyrotechnics. Let's break for a sip. No, not water. The headsman uncorks a jug of Hippocras, wine spiced with cloves, cinnamon, and honey. He swigs, wipes lips, then passes to the apprentice. Liquid courage transforms to vapor in cold lungs. You taste notes of iron from the blackened cup, clashing oddly with honey sweetness. Spices mask rot, medieval wine often soured. But Hippocras also numbs nerves. They call it quietus in a bottle. Now we follow them into the daylight. The sword, now wrapped, rests on the apprentice's shoulder. Citizens part like wheat before the reaper, some crossing themselves, others sneering. Children peek from doorways. One boy shouts, "Mida says your arm shakes." The headsman doesn't break stride. Public taunts are nothing new. His cheeks have heard worse. A baker's wife tosses a crust at his feet, perhaps pity, perhaps mock offering to death. Crows swoop, snag crumbs, scatter upward, omen or ordinary hunger, depending on whom you ask. As they near the prison yard, rhythm slows. Guards herd the condemned forward. Today's highwayman, wrists bound, hair matted from sleepless night. The man's eyes dart, measuring distance to the gate, to alleys, to improbable freedom. He sees the headsman approach and blurts, "One quick slash, I beg ye." Our executioner nods, a promise, maybe a lie. The prison cleric steps in, reading charges aloud for the crowd's benefit. Every word tastes like dust in the condemned's mouth. Ritual demands crowd involvement. A herald cries, "If any know just cause why this man should not die, speak now." Silence, except for an infant's cry and a drunk's hiccup. The condemned attempts a final speech, claims guilt, begs forgiveness, thanks the headsman by name, rare kindness. That name ripples through onlookers, scribes jotting it so future ballads get facts right. Names matter. They cling like burrs to reputation. March begins. Drums thud double time, steady as a heartbeat. The procession spills onto main thoroughfare, lined with vendors hawking miracle cures, headless blood salve, pastry peddlers, and gamblers exchanging coins. A tanner bets the headsman will sneeze mid-swing, odds 10-1. Laughter flares, quickly snuffed when guards glare. Humor edges horror here. Approaching the scaffold, our headsman senses damp boards beneath new straw. Carpenters replace 2 planks after yesterday's seep. Good, no wobble today. He ascends first, because authority stands above. The sun breaks clouds, bathing sword wrap in harsh white. The crowd hushes, anticipation thick as barley porridge. He unbinds the sword, draws it slow, metal flashing like lightning bottled. Let's slow to frames. Condemned kneels, assistant gathers hair, headsman raises blade. Muscles tense, canvas hood flutters, the watching world holds breath. In that sliver of eternity, one thought screams louder than prayer. Do not fail. Then, impact. Spine snaps, blood arcs, body slumps. One clean stroke. Crowd erupts, not in ghoulish joy. Well, some, but in collective exhale of civic order restored. The mayor nods. Relieved taxes pay for competence. Head held high, literally. The assistant grips hair, turns the face toward north, south, east, west, displaying justice fulfilled. Superstition says the dead's eyes capture last sights. By circling points of the compass, you blind vengeful spirits, forcing them to wander aimlessly. Gooseflesh pricks your arms, though midday sun warms your cloak. Our headsman wipes blade on straw, whispers thanks to whichever saint kept arm true, then sheathes steel. Magistrates toss a purse at his feet, payment in silver pennies. He counts quickly, short 2 coins. He frowns, the treasurer shrugs. Debate later, public grace now. He bows, crowd disperses. Some linger to soak straw in blood. Remember, potent medicine. Guards eventually shoo them away. Let's trail the headsman back through alleys, purse clinking. He stops at a baker. Yes, the same whose wife tossed crust earlier. Buys a loaf, hands extra coin as apology for scaring the child. Humanity flickers in darkness. Next, he visits the blacksmith, pays overdue sharpening fee, and shares quick gossip. Mayor's treasury thin. Watch your invoices. Finally, he slips into a modest tavern, orders thin stew. The innkeep sets bowl apart from others. Contamination fear, but conversation flows. A traveling minstrel asks to see the sword, politely refused. The minstrel instead scribbles verses about today's spectacle, grateful for first-hand color. By dusk, he'll sing it at crossroads, spreading the headsman's fame, or infamy, 2 villages over. Night falls. Our executioner trudges home outside city walls. Wife waits with lamp lit. Children sleep. He sets purse on table. She quietly counts, notes missing coins, says nothing. They share a silent meal. Candle gutters. On straw mattress, he closes eyes but hears phantom drum beats. Sleep trickles in, but a jerk of muscle, his sword arm, snaps him awake. He swallows a draught of nervinum from hidden flask, lets poppy tar dull guilt. At last, darkness claims him, studded with dreams of those compass point eyes. The air in the fortress corridor cools as we descend, torch sputtering above puddles that mirror its flame. Notice how each echo doubles in the vaulted passage, a sonic warning system for guards who never leave their posts. Ahead, twin oak doors banded with wrought iron ribs bulge like the chest of something breathing slowly. Carved into their surface are scores, scratch marks in sets of 5, as though someone tried to count days by clawing wood. Between scratches, candle soot fingerprints smear like drifting ghosts. Survivors of interrogation were escorted out this way in leg irons, worth less than the blood crusting their cuffs, yet still compelled to mark their passage, to say I existed to anyone who cared to look. The chief jailer's key, heavy as a small hammer, grates in the lock. He claims the squeal reminds tormentors to oil their tools. Truth is, the noise startles prisoners long before rope tightens. He shoulders the door and the smell hits first. Damp straw, scorched fat, and vinegar tinged with copper. The medieval recipe for disinfectant, never quite defeating the stench of fierce sweat and cauterized flesh. One step inside, your lungs sting as though steeped in raw onions. Victims described it as breathing through a wet rag soaked in pitch. Our first stop is the strappado beam, a thick timber jutting from the vaulted ceiling like a misplaced gallows. A hemp rope hangs, looped through a wooden pulley, blackened with age. Imagine standing on tiptoe while guards lash your wrists behind your back, knotting them to that rope. With a grunt they heave. Your body rises just off the floor, shoulders wrenching backward until joints threaten to part like bread crust. Some execution manuals advise torturers to leave victims suspended in jerking intervals, short, sharp drops that jolt tendons then catch them again, ripping micro-tears until arms resemble drawn-out parchment. Limbs dislocate silently at first, then with a pop that echoes off stone like a hunter's sling. Medieval doctors noted how armpit skin sometimes tore wide enough for ribs to peek, yet victims rarely bled to death. The damage was purely mechanical, leaving organs intact so questioning could continue. Pain without fatality, an artisan's principle. Beneath the strappado lies a shallow wooden trough, speckled red-brown. That's not for blood, but for vomit. During interrogation sessions, the bucket often overflowed with bile and half-digested turnip mash. The jailer's cat laps there between sessions, uncanny immune to infection. Superstitious guards believe the cat absorbs demon taint, keeping chamber walls from sprouting faces in the plaster. You chuckle, that's folklore. But glance at the mottled wall and notice shapes where dampness has formed uncanny silhouettes resembling screaming profiles. Candlelight makes them writhe. Perhaps the guards have a point. Follow me deeper. Here stands the Spanish donkey, a wedge-shaped bench, tapered to finger width at the crest. Prisoners straddled its edge naked while weights dangled from their ankles, gravity pressing groin onto the blade. Hardwood stained darker along the ridge where sweat and skin oils soaked in, sealing a permanent watermark of agony. Surviving petitions for mercy recount a crackling sound, pelvic bones stressing like green firewood before splitting at the symphysis. Few tortures targeted dignity so precisely, weaponizing shame and pain together. Despite the Spanish label, records show German city councils ordering 2 such benches in 1480, shipped like any mundane furniture, with invoices reading simply "wooden cheval for municipal security." Bureaucracy sanitizes horror. Notice the lantern mounted nearby. Torturers favored steady illumination, not to see better. They could work blindfolded, but so the victim could see. Light yanks pain into sharper relief, denying the mind refuge in darkness. Interrogators also believed certain truths remained hidden unless eyes stayed open, so they threatened lids with molten wax to keep them from closing. Even professional scribes, who later recopied confession transcripts, added notes like eyes rolled white at third question, wax applied, clarity returned. The bureaucracy of cruelty documented its own cosmetology. Against the far wall stands the rack. Most imagine a bed of wood and rollers, but here it's minimalist. 2 windlasses spaced 10 feet apart with a stout plank between. Cords twined from wrist manacles to one spindle, ankle cuffs to the other. Each turn clicks louder than the last. Physicians, yes physicians, hovered, counting tendon snaps, adjusting angle so spine stretched evenly. A treatise from Bologna recommends applying heat packs to the victim's flanks mid-stretch. Warmth softens muscle fibers, permitting greater extension before tearing. Science in the service of screams. Lest you wonder, the rack usually left few visible marks external. Skin might bruise, but bones parted internally, so victims displayed in court afterward seemed eerily intact, moving only with puppet jerk spasms. The absence of blood gave judges plausible deniability. We did not maim him. He merely chooses not to stand. Adjacent, we find a curious stool with seat perforations resembling lacework. Meet the interrogation chair. Iron spikes protrude through holes, dulled but plenty sharp to pierce cloth and skin when weight settles. A brazier slides beneath, heating spikes until they sizzle like bacon on griddle. There's a lever, a simple seesaw that tilts seat forward so the victim instinctively pushes back, impaling deeper. Psychological torture at its finest. You choose pain, not us. The chair's back still bears soot shadows where hair caught fire, outlining halos. That ironic imagery wasn't lost on clerics who sometimes officiated sessions, reciting psalms while victims shrieked, arguing divine truth surfaces fastest under flames. Pause here. Gaze up at the vaulted ceiling, spotting narrow shafts cut diagonally, acoustic ducts. On market days, the city allowed sound to leak upward, faint enough to blend with commerce, but unsettling enough to remind citizens law never sleeps. A baker kneading dough might pause, hearing a distant wail drift among church bells, shudder, and weigh extra salt of obedience into each loaf. Let's examine tools on the rolling cart. Pincers, notched to grip fingernails, a slender awl for wrapping, tapping cartilage between ribs, and the infamous pear, a metal bulb inserted into mouth or elsewhere, screw mechanism blooming petals outward, tearing tissue. Contrary to legend, pears rarely killed outright. Infection claimed the victim days later in dank cells. Medieval legal codes often forbid lethal torture before confession, but turned blind when death arrived by fever. Semantics of sin and consequence. Surprisingly, you'll notice a cloth bundle of herbs, sage, rue, lavender. Torturers stuffed handfuls in their nostrils to blunt smell, but superstition said herbs muffled victims' curses spilled into the air. The church debated this. Some theologians insisted screams, being sound waves, could not harbor demons. Others argued a heretic's dying breath might taint listeners' souls. The compromise? Incense after each session. Consequence: the chamber smells like a chapel upended. Frankincense overlaying charred flesh, sanctity married to sin. But how did one qualify as torturer? Forget myth of brutish sadists. Many were skilled craftsmen, butchers, tanners, surgeons. City councils recruited them because they knew anatomy and, more cynically, were already socially marginal. Payment mixed coin and privilege, tax exemptions, right to salvage victims' clothes. Yet they bore legal stigma, banned from guilds, forced to drink from separate pitchers at taverns. Child of an executioner could attend school only if sitting in last bench, quill shared by no one. Cruelty wasn't hereditary, but society acted otherwise, breeding loneliness that often molded the next generation's psyche. Fewer choices mean the blade passes from father to son. Picture a novice's first day. Master hands him a cat o' nine tails, instructs to lash a sack of sand in perfect arcs. Feel the bite, he says. Listen for whistle. At dusk, the sack splits, sand spills like hourglass grains, symbolic of lives he'll drain. When ready, apprentice grites to livestock carcasses, memorizing tendon resistance. Only after months will he face a living prisoner, heart hammering louder than the drum that punctuates each question. Many vomit after first interrogation. Some never stop shaking. A handful grow comfortable, too comfortable, flesh drunk, as clerks whispered. Councils occasionally executed their own torturers for excess zeal, fearing public backlash. The line between servant of law and monster remained razor thin, glinting in torchlight. We haven't yet addressed spectators behind hidden grills. Nobles, magistrates, sometimes curious scholars. Torture as theater, but VIP seating. Observers sipped spiced wine, taking notes on inflection of confessing voices, searching for political nuance. Was the rebel implicating allies? Did the thief reveal a bigger racket? Scribes inked transcripts so fast blotches dotted margins like ink pox. Afterward they debated authenticity. Was confession under duress valid? Canon law danced, a confession must be free, yet torture was persuasive. Theological contortion rivaled physical rack. One 14th century case in Avignon illustrates. A forger endured water torture, linen cloth over face, pitchers poured until lungs screamed. He confessed, recanted, then confessed again. Tribunal accepted second confession, citing cleansing clarity bestowed by suffering. Scribes circled words aqua clarificans, clarifying water. Meanwhile, physicians drained fluid from his lungs. He died 2 nights later. Official cause, weakness of spirit. Record closed, vault locked, lesson etched. Let's step into the side alcove, the branding hearth. 4 iron rods rest in coals, tips glowing cherry white. Symbols denote crimes, V for thief, voleur in French, M for murderer, F for forger. Some towns branded on cheek, others on shoulder, believing visible scar deterred repeat offense. But brandings often led to social exile, pushing branded souls toward vagrancy, ironically increasing crime. Thus, the punishment cycle fed itself, scar as both stigma and prophecy. Remark the water barrel nearby, rim-stained rust. Dunk the hot iron there after use, steam geysers upward, condensing on vault stones and raining back like sour sweat. That hiss is signature sound of finality, branding complete, crime incinerated into flesh. Victims faint not from pain alone, but from searing smell of their own burning skin. A scent primal brain reads as predator. Torturers wear damp cloth around mouth, not to protect lungs, but to separate themselves from that visceral empathy triggered by charred meat. Now, consider record keeping again. Each session ended with a clerk rubbing soot over parchment lines to seal confession. But tiny particles carried blood proteins. Modern forensics found traces centuries later. Every confession literally written in blood. That irony would amuse alchemists who believed ink extracted from life essence holds power. Some collected shavings of these char ink scroll edges, brewing them in elixirs, promising fluency in tongues or prophetic dreams. The black market for suffering remains evergreen. We can't leave without confronting the wheel. Popular myth pictures limbs threaded through spokes and hammered until joints ruptured. Reality? Worse. Victim laid belly down on ground, wheel balanced on back. Executioner swung iron cudgel along spokes, breaking bones through flesh, sound like splitting firewood. Then body woven through wheel's gaps, hoisted onto a pole. Crows feasted over days. But before death sentence, wheels served interrogation. Smaller replica bound limbs while twisting torso, a wooden corkscrew. 1 degree too far, spinal nerves sever, questioners trod border between extraction and execution. Lightning cracking outside flashes through slitted windows, illuminating walls where scribbled prayers hide. Guards graffiti, Lord shield my ears, or give me coins and quick sleep. Even tormentors fear haunting. They burn juniper each dawn, thick smoke scouring chamber of memories, or so they hope. All this begs the question. Did torture actually uncover truth? Contemporary studies of medieval court rolls show confessions often contradicted physical evidence. But confessions felt true, punctuated by cries, tears, visceral spectacle. so judges trusted them. Truth became theater, and theater fed authority. You, dear listener, might clutch blanket tighter, heart thumping in modern safety, yet echoes persist. The logic of fear, the calculus of pain, more effective than laws alone. Medieval cities institutionalized that logic, building chambers like textbooks in brick, teaching citizens obedience with every muffled wail. The lesson seeped into culture. Nursery rhymes warned children, "Tell no lie or the wheel will creak for thee." Generation taught by terror's whisper seldom forgets. Torch sputters low. Time we retreat up steps before jailer snaps doors shut for night. On the landing, fresh air tastes shockingly sweet, yet you carry chamber odor in clothes, mix of vinegar, ash, and something delicate. Lavender, remember? That herb bundle still tucked in torturer's sash. Even horror allows small mercies. A scent to remind him he is human under apron steel. As we exit, dawn bruises eastern clouds. Market bells toll, indifferent to sleepless prisoners. History marches on, leaving pain to echo in stone pores. But you heard it, you walk those corridors. Tonight, when pillow presses ear, you might still catch that distant click of rack windlass and wonder whose secrets cracked with bone. Snowflakes swirl past the lancet windows of the keep, yet the hallway beneath remains warm, not from any hearth, but from the kiln room we're about to enter. Most visitors imagine torture as ropes and blades. Few realize that, for inquisitors in the colder reaches of Bohemia and the Low Countries, heat was both tool and theology. Pain by flame, they reasoned, mirrored the purgatorial fires said to scorch sin from the soul. So tonight, step inside the furnace chamber and feel how judgment can glow hotter than any smith's forge. The door sighs open like bellows, exhaling a gust that smells of scorched wool and resin. Crimson light spills across flagstones in flickering stripes. At center stands a brick oven wide as a tomb, its mouth ringed by iron tongues, shovels, and a row of spatulas the size of oars. No, they're not for bread. They're for test plates. Thin copper discs slid into the coals, then pressed against a prisoner's flesh to gauge readiness for deeper branding. You temper steel by first testing straw, wrote one Saxon manual, and men by first testing skin. Notice the mason jars lining a shelf, each filled with oils of differing viscosities. One glints amber, bear fat, another milky, goat tallow, a third nearly black, linseed steeped in ash. These were not balms of mercy. Heated fats dripped into wounds to prolong agony without letting flesh char outright, sustaining the subject, suspending that delicate balance between excruciating and lethal. Physicians monitored temperature with bare knuckles pressed against copper. Too hot, skin singes, just right it sears slowly, writing maps of pain across nerve endings. A grisly cartography. At the chamber's far end waits an unassuming barrel half filled with water. That's not for extinguishing flames, it's for scalding. Boil the water, strip the accused, lower a single limb, perhaps hand or foot, until sizzle marks rise like an angry rash. Then present a quill and parchment. Fingers trembling, flesh blistered, the prisoner must sign confession. If the script remains legible despite tremors, scribes whisper it's proof Satan guided the pen, because no mere human could write through such pain. The irony is unmistakable. Clarity becomes evidence of devilry. Let us linger on those scribes. They, too, belong to this infernal ecosystem. Dressed in robes black as ink, they perched on stools just beyond spark spray, quills clenched like surgical blades. Every gasp, every plea, every deranged prayer, they captured all, abbreviating nothing. Margins bristle with shorthand marks, DCL for distinct cry louder, MPT for most pitiful tears. They debated style, competed to outpace each other in faithful transcription, priding themselves on manuscripts as accurate as the Last Judgment's ledger. When the wardens cooled irons in troughs, sizzling echoes punctuated the scribe's cursive. A perverse metronome. Back toward the oven stands what appears to be a rotating spit, except the axle supports a metal cage cramped enough that knees press chin. Meet the brazen cradle. Prisoners locked inside were slowly revolved before the fire, roasting one side at a time. Operators cranked by hand, guided by scent. When the aroma of blistered flesh drifted strong, they paused to question. Folk stories say you could smell caramelized sweat 3 towers away. Historians once doubted that, until an archaeological dig uncovered floorboards here impregnated with human fats, still detectable after 600 winters. Between the cage and the barrel hangs a simple iron rod capped by a sphere, the speaking ball. Imagine a red-hot globe approaching your lips, an interrogator promising to stamp your mouth unless you speak truth. Many confessed before contact, convinced that scorched tongues meant eternal silence at Judgment Day. Superstition outpaced physical torment. Pain's threat alone bent wills. Slip through the side arch to meet another breed of torture. Cold's grim twin. A spiral stair descends to a windowless cell nicknamed the icebox. Not built of ice, but cut so deep in bedrock that walls weep condensation year-round. Prisoners from the furnace chamber sometimes jolted here mid-session, searing heat followed by glacial damp. The body, confused by extremes, spasmed violently, muscles cramping, heartbeat skittering. Chronicles speak of hearts shattering like glass. This pendulum of temperature wasn't mere sadism. Inquisitors believed alternating elements, fire then water, forced demons to flee the orifices they clung to. Candles gutter in this moisture. Instead, guards carried small rushlights coated in animal fat that burned blue, painting the cell in corpse-hued light. Something moves in the darkness, just a rat nosing a fetter bolt. Rodents thrived here, feeding off discarded scraps of bread, and when desperation overtook humans, even flesh. One account from Trier details a prisoner chewing own fingers, numb from frostbite. Rats finished what he began. Interrogators recorded every macabre detail, citing it later as proof of moral decay. Return topside, but pause beneath the ceiling vents and listen. Distant bells toll matins. Dawn is near. Yet our guide insists we watch the morning ritual, the washing of guilts. In the courtyard, 4 stone basins collect snowmelt. At sunrise, condemned prisoners, whether broken or defiant, kneel beside them. A friar ladles frigid water over blistered backs, murmuring psalms. Ostensibly cleansing sin, the rinse also accentuates wounds for crowds arriving later to glimpse justice. Merchants hawk cider, children climb shoulders for view. Tourism of torment. City coffers swelled from fines and curios sold, fragments of noose, pieces of rack splinter, even vials of ash scraped from branding irons touted as apotropaic charms. And here we confront the marketplace of pain. Behind scaffold rows stands a stall piled with replicas. Miniature wheels carved from yew, dolls bound in tiny stocks, tin whistles shaped like gibbets. Pilgrims carried them home, talismans reminding family to obey law. Much like modern souvenir shops peddle snow globes of cathedrals, medieval vendors sold fear in pocket form. Why did towns tolerate such gruesome enterprise? Economics and spectacle interwove. Public tortures drew visitors, stimulating inns and taverns. Magistrates justified costs by citing reduced crime, though statistics, if kept, were as pliable as confession ink. Yet dissent bubbled. Preachers decried cruelty, poets satirized officials, and secret societies smuggled pamphlets condemning the wheel as a futile compass seeking truth yet spinning sin. These murmurs seeded reforms centuries later, but for now pain reigned. Walk with me into the records chamber, quieter but no less chilling. Shelves groan beneath scrolls bound by sinew strings, actual strips of condemned men's hides, tanned like parchment. To touch one is to sense an unsettling warmth, as though memory still pulses within. Archivists wore gloves not solely for preservation, but from superstition that guilt might leach through skin. They cataloged confessions with librarian precision: name, date, method, fracture count, final prayer. Some scrolls sealed by wax imprinted with skull device, a seal broken only on higher authority. A modern researcher once cracked such a seal and found within not words but a fingernail, wrapped in vellum scribbled witness. The text itself had faded, leaving only this grim footnote. The psychological machinery extended beyond prisoners to populace. Law mandated that at least once a year, every citizen witness an interrogation or execution, a ritual called Chastening Day. Absence fined. Elders claimed watching purified townsfolk, reminding them of fragile souls. But diaries reveal nightmares thereafter, visions of endless corridors, teeth cracking like acorns, fires that sizzled from inside bones. Trauma became communal, binding society in hush. Perhaps that's why gossip blooms so fiercely afterward. Words chase away memory's scorch marks. Now imagine the torturer's evening after shift. He trudges home through slush, hides tools and chest beneath floorboards, washes, but stench clings like a second tunic. His wife stuffs rue under mattress to ward off carried evil spirits. At supper, children sneak glances at his hands, searching for blood specks. They ask about day's weather. He replies damp, leaving it there. Yet ledger shows magistrate docked his pay because the wheel splintered, requiring costly repair. Even cruelty faces budget cuts. Speaking of budgets, let's peek at the treasury ledger displayed inside the alderman's hall. Expenses list: heating charcoal, 2 florins, replacement manacles, 5 florins, doctor's attendance to keep alive subject, 8 florins. Not items of horror, just lines of accounting. Pain translated into currency, like wheat or timber. In a marginal doodle, some bored clerk inked a tiny gallows sprouting coins instead of corpses. Gallows humor quite literal. Beyond clerk's quills lies the Whisper Gallery, a low tunnel connecting chamber to church sacristy. Through cleverly carved vents, priests could eavesdrop on interrogations, gleaning heretical tidbits without official presence. The church thus preserved plausible deniability. One vent shaped like gargoyle mouth, another a haloed saint. Victims sometimes addressed pleas to these figures, mistaking holes for holy icons, and indeed priests recorded on treaties, later cited to bolster charges of blasphemy. The architecture weaponized faith itself. Our final vista this dawn is rooftop parapet. From here, the entire town sprawls under breathless sky streaked salmon pink. You can trace path of underground ducts by frost melting above warmer corridors. Notice central square scaffolding draped in tar cloth. Sun will dry it before noon, ready for today's flogging. Children already gather, munching hazelnuts. A juggler rehearses to keep crowds occupied between moans. Torture interludes met with entertainment. This coexistence of cruelty and carnival defines the era. Human despair as civic pageant. And you, gentle viewer, have trudged along, eyes open, heart perhaps pounding louder than the blacksmith's hammer beyond the gate. You've smelled burnt hair mingled with incense, felt the oven's roar against snow-cooled cheeks, glimpsed the bureaucratic tendrils that made torment routine. Yet still you linger, a modern pilgrim carrying digital torchlight into shadowed rooms. That curiosity links you to those long-ago townsfolk, the need to look, to understand, maybe to warn. The spiral stair corkscrews downward, each tread slick with a glaze of lime dust that never quite dries. Your palm traces the wall for balance. Note how the mortar narrows, funneling sound so a whisper above will hiss like wind in your ear. That design is deliberate, built to carry screams up to the guard posts without alerting townsfolk outside. But we're leaving the furnace chamber behind. Ahead lies the oubliette, literally the place of forgetting. A squat wooden door, chest high, bars entry. The jailer unlatches it with a shuffle that sounds apologetic, as though even he regrets what we're about to see. You have to crawl, knees crunch straw, chin brushes damp stone. The tunnel beyond lasts only 6 body lengths, but the darkness feels geological, ancient. At its end yawns a vertical shaft like a well, except there is no bucket, no rope, no hope. Prisoners dropped feet first, or head first for extra persuasion, landed on a slanted stone that broke ankles before sliding them into blackness. Bread crust shoveled down twice a week. Water dripped from moss above, a grudging mercy. Peer over the rim. Smell that mildew sting? Corpses left too long ferment into gases that whisper past your cheeks. Chroniclers said the oubliette talked at dusk, exhaling moans as trapped air escaped around bloated bodies. Superstition claimed each sigh carried a lie the victim never confessed. Thus, wardens listened, parsing gases for secrets post-mortem. You might scoff, but a 1497 ledger notes information acquired from air, leading to 3 further arrests. Apparently, rumor and hydrogen sulfide make a potent intelligence network. Back along the crawlway, a side hatch opens into the surgeon's annex. The term surgeon conjures white linens and scalpels. Erase that. Imagine instead a carpenter's workshop, clamps, saws, awls. Because medieval surgery grew from joinery, the body viewed as wood to be planed or pegged. On the central trestle table lies a leather roll of gleaming implements, slender gimlets for boring trepan holes, hooked retractors nicknamed fishhooks of faith, a bronze syringe thick as goose quill, used to inject boiling water into ear canals, thought to dislodge devils. The floor beneath bears concentric stains, each ring darker toward the center, like growth rings of a terrible tree. Our guide, Master Eberhardt, wipes a blade with wool soaked in wine. Wine's tannins, he explains, close the wound while opening the conscience. Practical and poetic. He demonstrates on a slab of pork, carving a flap, then stitching it with catgut threaded through a goosebone needle. Notice his rhythm, pierce, pull, pierce, pull. During interrogation, the same cadence stabbed human skin, punctuated by questions. Surgeons considered themselves humane. Their interventions kept victims alive for magistrates, an ethical sleight of hand. When limbs threatened gangrene, they applied hot irons, not to torture but to cauterize. Pain sat at every junction, an unavoidable toll. Shelves above the workbench hold ceramic jars labeled verbena, henbane, mandrake. These herbs formed the period's anesthesia, though blessed oblivion lasted minutes at best and often induced hallucinations worse than agony. Victims strapped for amputation sometimes screamed at things only they could see. Winged bishops, headless saints, mothers at cottage doors. The surgeon dismissed them as spiritual noise. Scribes dutifully transcribed hallucinations, filing them with evidence. Some city councils accepted a delirious vision as divine testimony. Truth again bent to whatever shape torment made. Lift the leather curtain it back, and you step into the salt cell. No heat, no blades, just a barrel large enough to swallow a grown man. The prisoner, freshly flayed or sliced, was lowered into brine. Salt cauterized, yes, but also stung like red-hot cinders, amplifying pain. Witnesses claimed cries in the salt cell rose one octave higher than elsewhere, as if the brine tuned vocal cords. Guards believed those shrieks cracked stone. The walls here show hairline fissures spidering upward. Whether caused by resonance or just frost, nobody knows, but the myth persists. Agony leaves its own architecture. A servant girl enters with a wicker tray of bread crusts soaked in vinegar. Prisoners in recovery, if such a word applies, gnawed these to regain strength for further questioning. Vinegar killed some bacteria, but also puckered raw mouths, making speech painful. One clerk's margin note, subject hesitated to name co-conspirators, applied vinegar ration, speech loosened. Simple, brutal cause and effect. Enough viscera. Follow me back through the annex, up a narrow stairway that exits behind the courtroom gallery. The sudden daylight sears after torchlight's gloom. Parliament-gowned aldermen rustle parchment, and you realize proceedings are already underway. Defendants stand in dock, shoulders hunched, faces pallid. You, having toured the depths, recognize the subtle tells. Swollen wrists, trembling knees, eyes that flinch at every gavel thud because they expect cudgels instead. The court claims testimony is voluntary now, but everyone sees the phantom rack stretching across defendants' spines. Here's the macabre twist. Torture, officially, occurred before trial merely to gather facts. Yet the same judges who ordered it sit here weighing those facts, a loop as tight as a noose. Occasionally a defendant recants in open court. Protocol then demands verification by renewed examination, meaning they're hauled back below. Of course, most simply nod through scripted confession. Efficiency trumps accuracy. Observe the court scribe's pen. Each time a defendant stutters, he looks to the bench. If a cough signals pain, he pauses, uncertain whether to record it as faltering or defiance. Language itself contorts. Latin merges with vernacular. Where Latin lacks a word, clerks invent one. Strapidare for undergo strappado, verniculi for speak through fire. These neologisms trickle into dictionaries centuries later, sanitized of origin like bones bleached in sun. Court recess calls, benches scrape, murmurs swell. Our guide points to a side door, magistrate's robbing chamber. Inside, scarlet gowns hang beside warming braziers, because chilled judges risk shivering, and trembling could be mistaken for compassion. A table set with sweetmeats, figs, candied orange peel, and honey-glazed almonds, waits. The irony is thick. Honey upstairs, salt downstairs. Two flavors of dominion. One magistrate, Gerlach von Thun, invites us to sample almond clusters. He claims sweet taste steadies judgment. As he nibbles, he recounts an inquest where a mere rumor of witchcraft condemned 10 women. No torture necessary. The community's fear sufficed. He shrugs, when mind is terrorized, flesh need not be. This, perhaps, is ultimate evolution. Terror so ingrained, the tools grow moot. Leave the courtroom by an oak arch into the gallery of effigies. Wooden mannequins line the wall, each clad in garments seized from executed criminals. A heretic's patched cloak, a bravo's doublet slit by sword thrust, a smuggler's smock still smelling of river tar. Schoolchildren filed through weekly, teachers lecturing on moral failings, pointing to stains as visual aids. A medieval scare-straight program. Some parents bribed custodians to sneak their rebellious sons down here at midnight for private viewing, swearing the mannequins came alive in moonlight. Eyes glinting, limbs creaking. Trauma as pedagogy, generationally passed like heirloom. Night falls again. The fortress lamps blossom. Our circuits might seem endless, but we've one station left, the ledger vault. Beneath 3 locked grates lies cedar-lined room no bigger than pantry, yet more dangerous than any rack. Here rest letters of perdition, sealed orders authorizing torture. Each parchment edges singed in candle flame, stamped with blood-red wax, sometimes literally mixed with a judge's own drop of blood to prove commitment. Access is limited. Forging such letter is capital crime. Yet rumors whisper of counterfeiters selling blank forms to rival towns, feeding a black market of fear where one city might sabotage another by planting forged confessions. You notice a slim volume titled Tariff of Suffering. Open to a random page. Dislocation of shoulder, 5 florins. Crushing of thumb, 2 florins. Water ordeal, first pitcher, 1 florin. Pain quantified like barley bushels. Next page lists discounts for bulk interrogations, an early form of wholesale justice. Economists will later cite these ledgers as embryonic cost-benefit analyses in public policy. Footnotes seldom mention screams. It's near midnight. Snow again dusts arrow slits, muffling all sound but one, the slow drip of water from ceiling. Drop, drop. Most visitors overlook this, yet wardens swear they hear each drip strike floor exactly where a man once bled out, creating eternal echo. Folklore? Perhaps. But absence of bodies doesn't erase presence of suffering. Stone has memory beyond ours. Before we leave, the jailer hands you a small cloth pouch. Inside, an iron nail no longer than thumb. A souvenir, he says, but it's no tourist trinket. These nails were hammered into beams to tally number of prisoners processed. When rack consumed one more soul, jailer drove another nail. Over years, beams sprouted bristling iron whiskers until wood cracked under weight, just like bodies under interrogation. Holding it, you sense vibration, imagined or residual, like faint heartbeat of bygone agony. Some visitors cast nails into rivers for absolution. Others keep them as reminder to guard their own freedoms. You'll decide later, staring at ceiling in darkness. We retrace steps past shuttered court, surgeon's annex now shadow-hushed, furnace coals dulled to ruby eyes. Every clank of your boots seems sacrilegious amid sleeping horrors. At last you feel wintry air knife lungs. Outside gate, world goes about mundane tasks. Bakers proofing dough, lovers sighing, a minstrel plucking lute. They cannot imagine what we've seen, yet their laws write it, their taxes fund it, their silence lets it thrive. The sealed letters await us in the archive's innermost sanctum, a room so narrow you can steady yourself on both walls at once. Two guards lift a grated hatch, the iron teeth meshing like jaws, and a hush floats out, dust adrift in torchlight, motes turning as though frightened of being read. You inhale parchment and beeswax, a scent both sweet and foreboding, the smell of decisions made far from daylight. Each letter of perdition bears a crimson ribbon threaded through a wafer of wax impressed with a signet, a gauntleted fist, a bishop's crozier, a merchant's coin. Different authorities, one outcome. But look closer. Beneath the formal script lies a second, smaller hand, initials scrawled in walnut ink. These are the scribe's countersigns, required so future generations could trace guilt, in theory. Most scribes wrote hastily, letters collapsing into blots. Some dipped their quills in diluted blood for permanence, the iron turning parchment rusty brown. Ironically, that made forgeries easier. Mix oxgall and vinegar and any pen could mimic it. Take this letter dated 14th of February 1482. The opening lines read, "By the virtuous authority vested in the municipal council and for the salvation of souls, it is decreed that the bearer may employ instrumenta tormentorum in measure fitting to conscience." Sound almost merciful, doesn't it? Yet the margins bristle with amendments. Thumbscrew, yes, strappato, postponed until physician present, fire, interdict if subject is noble. Justice on a sliding scale. You double over the parchment, the script crackling like old leaves, and imagine the quill strokes, one heartbeat per written word, ink sinking into fibers as if blood into skin. Law and flesh blurred even on page. Our archivist, Frau Constanza, unlocks a low chest banded in brass. Inside, relics rest the way saints' bones might nestle in reliquaries. A pair of spectacles with cracked green lenses, a signet ring flattened on one side, a child's linen shoe hardened with varnish. These aren't souvenirs. Each was pledged as collateral by accusers or witnesses. If their testimony proved false, they forfeited the object and paid a fine. In practice, such safeguards eroded, rings forgotten, shoes never reclaimed, truth cheapened like copper coins passed too often. Constance's lantern highlights one remaining bundle, a folio bound with catgut, spine scarred by rats. She calls it the Liber Oblitus, the Book of the Forgotten. Compiled in 1521 during an influenza outbreak, it catalogued prisoners who died unnamed, bodies incinerated to prevent plague. No trials, no graves, only ledger lines. Male, approximate 30 winters, left ear missing, recanted heresy after water ordeal, succumbed third sunrise. 11 pages of souls reduced to inventory. You trace a finger down the list until your nail hooks a tear in vellum. An absence inside an absence. At this moment, the weight of centuries seems unbearable. Our guide senses it. She gestures toward an alcove where fresh air slithers through arrow slits. There stands a wooden box like a confessional minus priest, the Arca Memoriae. Visitors deposit small tokens, coins, poems, locks of hair, to honor the unremembered. You drop the iron nail you carried from the torture beam earlier. It lands with a clink soft as snowfall, joining hundreds of mute witnesses. For a heartbeat, the room feels lighter. as though the stone exhaled. Yet remembrance must outrun mere ritual. We still need to expose the architects of agony. Constanza directs us to portraits lining the corridor outside the archive. Oil darkened by soot depicts magistrates in fur-trimmed robes, hands clasped over sealed scrolls. Their painted eyes glimmer with that paradoxical mix of civic pride and personal dread. They wielded terror, yet feared it boomeranging back. Because statistically, Constanza hands you a brittle pamphlet. 1 in 20 officials eventually face the same devices they authorized, victims of political tides. Power, it seems, adored eating its own tail. Case in point, Dietrich von Selm, bailiff of Dortmund, who pioneered the velvet interview. He'd seat suspects on cushioned chairs, offer marzipan, and coax confessions with honeyed voice, before sending them downstairs for verification. The public hailed his gentleness, until evidence surfaced that he sold blank torture warrants to rival cities. Tried, convicted, he died under the Spanish donkey, his agonized split body a morbid endorsement of the very commerce he created. The portrait shows him unblemished, but a note beneath records, canvas restored 1680, wound depiction removed. Even paint was tortured into silence. You ask Constanza why these portraits aren't torn down. She replies, to remind us that cruelty once wore respectable faces. In the flicker of her lantern, the faces almost smile, perhaps grateful someone finally looks beyond guilt. A bell tolls midnight from the city's cathedral, vibrations pulsing through stone floors like a slow drum. That sound triggered nightly rounds. Guards inspected irons to ensure no captives froze to death prematurely. A dead witness was useless. We follow a patrol down corridors echoing with clatter of keys. You notice their lanterns shielded so the light spills forward but not behind. Darkness always nips at their heels, a canine they refuse to face. Passing the surgeon's annex again, we halt before a chart scrawled in charcoal. Silhouettes of various body parts with numbers beside them. 23, 11, 4. It's a map of fail points, the places where prisoners most often lost sensation and fainted. Too many collapses wasted time, so surgeons studied physiology like siege engineers study walls. Knees buckled at precisely 19 minutes of rope suspension, wrists dislocated after 7 cranks of the rack, the human voice fractured into incoherence following 3 cycles of water infusion. Optimization of pain, science pressed into service of dread, but even dread meets resistance. Enter the Chapel of Reprieve, a cramped cell where confessors granted final rites. Candles gutter on fat waxed sconces, fresco saints scrubbed nearly blank by centuries of breath. Here, some prisoners carved messages into floorboards, not curses but instructions. Bite tongue to feign seizure, hum psalms to pace heart, or simply endure. Hacksaws hidden in Bible spines allowed a handful to escape irons, though stone walls still caged them. Legends say one woman, Marita der Stein, sang so purely during torture that a guard wept and freed her at dawn. She fled, joined a convent, and wrote a treatise arguing God counted tears of jailers alongside those of victims. Radical empathy, smuggled out through song. Constanza unlocks the chapel's side cupboard. Inside, a tarnished censer emits faint ghost of frankincense. Beneath it, something startling, a recorder flute. She explains musicians sometimes accompanied interrogations, piping hymns to drown screams so townsfolk wouldn't hear. Music as gag. You lift the recorder, its wood still warm from human hands across decades. Place it to your lips, you won't blow, but you sense vibrations humming within, as if notes linger, waiting to be freed. The patrol leads on to the courtyard. Snow glitters under moon, powdered sugar over a cake baked from sorrow. Execution scaffold long dismantled, only 4 post holes remain. A plaque reads, "May justice henceforth have no need of rope." Noble sentiment, yet behind you the dungeon persists. Constanza whispers, "The stones outlast the laws." She gestures toward the moat. In winter it froze solid. Wardens once marched prisoners across to a tiny ice island. The mirror ordeal. If the ice cracked under accused weight, it signaled guilty soul too heavy with sin. Rarely did anyone fall through, but fear alone wrenched confessions. Today the moat glints harmless, yet you imagine footsteps crunching, echoing in frozen night. Across courtyard stands a new annex, now a museum gift shop, ironically. Shelves of replica shackles, pewter mugs, postcards of the Iron Maiden, which historians remind was mostly 19th century myth. Tourists buy horror in pocket size. You recall the nail you relinquished earlier and feel relief you didn't commercialize it. Memory should weigh, not decorate refrigerators. Inside the shop, a display of children's books. Brave Hans escapes the tower, reduces centuries of torment to cartoon adventure. A father flips pages for his daughter. She giggles at illustrations of a mustached jailer chased by geese. Innocence demands digestible narratives. But we, nocturnal scholars, cannot settle for sugar-coated folklore. We've walked the hidden mile, and the knowledge clings. Dawn bleeds into horizon, lavender over slate rooftops. Our tour began at dusk. 12 hours later we re-emerge, carrying an invisible cargo of echoes. You may feel heaviness behind your eyes, a pressure of uncried tears. That's normal, the body reacting to borrowed anguish. We stop on a bridge overlooking the city. Smoke rises from bakeries, mixing with church bells tolling prime. Commuters shuffle, unaware they move atop caverns where pain was perfected. A thought surfaces. Torture ends not when tools are broken, but when memory rejects their glamour. To remember is to disarm. So what legacy do we draw? First, that procedure can mask brutality. Signatures, stamps, polite phrasing, all thread silk over iron. Second, that fear sells. Magistrates, merchants, even tourists paying for postcards. Third, that resistance sprouts in cracks. Songs, floorboard scripts, runaway tears. And lastly, that you, dear listener, are custodian of these lessons now. History entrusts them to your hush-lit mind like Constanza entrusting parchments to cedar-lined vaults. I promised we'd unmask the men behind the warrants. Truth is, they were ordinary. Clerks, clergy, councilmen, with hopes, debts, favorite songs. Evil rarely sports horns. It signs in triplicate and then joins family for supper. Recognizing that ordinariness terrifies more than monster tales, but it also empowers. If cruelty is human-made, humanity can dismantle it. The sky brightens, frost limbs parapets. You might feel an urge to shake off gloom, breathe crisp air, maybe laugh at absurdity of midnight tourism. Do. Laughter proves bloodstream still yours, not chained below. Yet keep one memory vivid, that iron nail lying in the Arca Memoriae. It bonds us, viewer and vanished prisoner, historian and janitor, past and present, in silent covenant to notice suffering before it tunnels underground again. Now wipe dust from coat, straighten spine. You've navigated every stair, every shriek-hollow corridor. Few can claim that courage. Mark the moment by smashing like so. The algorithm knows empathy matters. Type memory is armor in the comments if you'll carry these stories forward. And if you've just tuned in at part 7, Madness, catch prior episodes for full descent. Hit subscribe so next time history whispers, you're first to hear. With that, our grim pilgrimage concludes. May your pillow feel softer for having cradled hard truths, and may the only chains you ever bear be those you choose. Chains of responsibility to remember, to speak, to break cycles where you find them. Good night, brave soul. Let the dungeon doors slam shut behind you and stay